So why did you decide to do Y Combinator in the first place? If you were so senior, I imagine you had a good network. You had a co-founder already, right? So what was the reason to do YC?
Felt like Silicon Valley outsiders, frankly. Like we were kind of in London, and like I know lots and lots of people there, but the VC world is totally different in San Francisco. So like to the point where all of my online presence kind of says I'm in San Francisco because I'm like I don't want to get invest. I just don't want to deal with investors that aren't from there. Like super racist to like non-American investors, basically. As in like if they're from like the UK or something. Like to give you an example, I once got a term sheet from an investor when we did think our Series B or something. It's like the only one I've got. And they must have told me maybe like 30 times how founder friendly they were. And like if you deal with like an investor on the West Coast of the US, like the term sheet's like you get like a few bullet points basically, like this valuation, like this is size employee pool. This is the person that's paying for the legal fees of this cap. Like it's so simple. There's just like a few, yeah, it's like a quarter of a page kind of thing. This one from the UK had like 8 pages. Oh, cool. Like now my focus is on like stupid paperwork or whatever. And like they're trying to make money on the minimizing like downside risk rather than like, whereas the power law of like startups basically dictates like you should be optimizing for gaining upside from these
Yeah.
startups, which means getting out of the way. And so it's been unbelievably impactful. Like where I used to work, we had like a really nice, the board were really nice when I worked for UK, like UK kind of European VCs backing us. And it was very like revenue focused, but it was all run like
Yeah.
very kind of, but it skewed all our thinking towards like what's in our pipeline and sales and stuff. And we just didn't have the product focus. Whereas I think if you, especially for like a that grows by being engineering led, like I just think the US is like by far and away the place to have the
Yeah.
easiest time. And it's like the most expensive plane ticket you can not get is the one to go to America.
Y Combinator was a way to inject the Silicon Valley DNA into the founding of the company. It sounds like that worked really well. Why not relocate to California then?
Yeah, we nearly did. Like I was gonna probably do it in like 2020. But then because of remote work, so then COVID happened. Like we started writing the first line of code of Postdog was written like at the end of January 2020. And we launched on Hacker News in February. Kind of took off, but then COVID happened in like March or April or whatever, 2020. And so it wasn't a choice to live there. Like my wife was at home. I was doing the batch, and she was pregnant with our first kid. So like definitely had to come home. I'm a big believer. Is it which law is it? Is Conway's law? Like we've designed the organization to fit our product strategy. So like we're trying to build this really wide platform with tons of products inside it. Shipping velocity is really important to us. Like we want engineers to be able to like absolutely hammer out stuff quickly. Like we're not winning on like the level of like micromanaged polish on like the next iPhone or something, where it's like every cylinder
Yeah.
is probably like designed by someone or whatever, and like everything's dictated. And so it's like we're completely on the other end of the spectrum. Whereas like a level of chaos is totally acceptable and worth the trade-off for like sheer velocity. I think remote work has worked well because we have long stretches of uninterrupted time. And I think the other thing is we're not building anything like this sounds kind of nuts, but like we're not building anything particularly innovative from a technology perspective. So like
Hmm.
we have very demanding work for like performance and scalability. And like the product stuff is challenging, but like what we're not trying to do is like define a new category of product. So for example, if I were building like an AI business, I would want to be in Silicon Valley because like I need to a core part of getting product market fit is understanding like a very dramatically changing kind of landscape. Whereas I think because our strategy product wise is like we're building into competitive markets by design, they're already defined. And so like we can just go fight in them. And like we're fighting by like not screwing around in an office, how like distracting each other or whatever. We've seen quite dramatic differences in performance depending on the level of experience of people. I kind of think you sort of, if you're running a startup, I think you're like kind of everyone's 20 and you're working like 16 hours a day and you just brute force your way
Yeah.
through every problem, which is like definitely a valid
Right.
way of running. I think and you do that in person. Cracked junior engineer kind of vibe in your office, and you have like a bench press in there and all this kind of stuff, whatever else is like trending. I think the other way of doing it is we're building a very wide platform. We have tons of things built on top of each other, and we're completely engineering led, and we need to have high engineering velocity at scale. So people with more experience are going to introduce less crap into the code base, and they're going to just like they'll have seen the problems you get later on by virtue of having had more experience. So like we tend to hire people with a lot more experience, like a smaller number of more expensive people. Basically, they tend to have, and the way we've realized that people with more experience, like they're often older, they often have families and kids and stuff because they're just a bit older to have had the years to get the experience. And so they love working all remote. And so I think if you're building like a super wide platform and you're going to be like very engineering led, very long term, and you're not having to like navigate a very dramatically changing landscape for AI or something, I would think like all remote and like a smoother culture, like a smoother approach to delivery, as opposed to like made up deadlines and stuff, to introduce technology again, it's quite important. So for us, what works badly is hiring like a very junior person that like needs the energy of an office to get work done, which I think for people early in their career, it's kind of more the exception than the rule, that I think people do better when they're in person. There are definitely people who are exceptions to that, like people who've like very good histories of like shipping lots of like quite impressive side projects and stuff. It means they're more intrinsically motivated, but you need to be exceptionally intrinsically motivated to be successful early in your career in a remote company, I think. And so we've sort of defaulted to having more experience, which it has some downsides to it as well.